If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you like this video, leave a like.
Hello, my friends. Hello. Just a word or two about voice teaching and about YouTube. We all know that YouTube is a great collection of terrific things and questionable things and horrific things. The buyer has to beware. And so you've got to know a little bit in order to pick it out, pick the good from the bad. Now, I don't like to identify people by name and to badmouth them, and I won't do that. So I am going to mention that there is a teacher on YouTube who used to be a tenor, and now he's an old man, he's 80, and he can still sing a bit, and he has this big institute and for voice teaching, and he has a lot of videos on YouTube that people are really excited about. And that's okay. I don't agree with everything he says, and I want to explain a little bit about why. Not because of him, but about the issues that are involved. You see, he's basically what we call an empirical teacher. That is, he deals with his experience of singing as usually judged by his feelings, and he deals with other singers' experience of their singing, and usually that is described in terms of the feelings they had. This is old stuff. I mean, while it is important that we acknowledge how we feel during singing, the actual teaching of singing needs to incorporate the knowledge which has been learned in voice science. I had a natural voice. Anybody could have taught me. Every teacher I went to said, "Now we don't want to touch your voice." So I studied with Cesare Bardelli, and he said, "I don't want to touch your voice. You can sing in any theater right now." I went to Jerome Hines. "I don't want to touch your voice." Every teacher I went to said that. But I'm not the usual type of singer. Natural singers, this is not bragging, this is just fact, natural singers are not that commonly found. But for most people, it's important to learn a little bit about how the voice works. Not that you have to become a medical person, but I give you an example. Ingo Tietze is a teacher of voice, and he's a voice scientist. I think he may also be an ENT, I'm not sure. But he gives us as a guide, he says, the mind can control the body better when it has a little bit of understanding about how the mind works. And that's the way with singers. You don't have to know the name of every muscle, but you should have a good inner visualization of the actual processes that are going on. Not that you have to imagine the vocalis muscles or the arytenoids when you're singing, but you should have a good visual understanding of the whole process of singing, as it's been clarified now over the past 40 years. So it's basically recent information. And for someone to be an empirical teacher and not be conversant with all the studies that have been done in the last 40 years and be able to learn from them and to edit your past assumptions, that's a big deal. So when someone says, "Well, I pull my stomach in when I sing because so-and-so singer did that," that's not enough. You've got to be able to look at all the voice science controlled experiments and see what they actually came to conclusions about. Okay? Richard Miller is a great writer. He usually says the right things, and he writes in a very readable way. So maybe you can't plow through Sundberg's book, The Science of the Singing Voice, though you should try. But you could plow through Richard Miller's books. They're really good to read. And they both agree. It's just that Richard wrote a little bit more easy to read than did Johann Sundberg. But Sundberg is the top voice scientist still. You read his books, you'll read what all of the various scientific experiments in the last 50 years have taught us and told us. And then you won't be asking some empirical voice teacher whether you should stick your belly out or pull it in or tighten your butt or, all of this stuff that goes around from generation to generation. And it's a problem. So any modern voice teacher, it's not enough just to say, I read Caruso's book, okay? Or I sang with some good singers, yeah. Or I'm 80 years old and I can still sing. So could Lottie Volpe. Well, I tell you what, I was born with a deformed heart and deformed blood vessel system, and people born that way were not supposed to live past their teens, but I got corrective surgery, and I went on to have a major career even when I had 3 heart surgeries, and now I have a pacemaker and a defibrillator installed in me, and because of malpractice in one of my heart surgeries, my lungs now only hold about 1 liter of air. And against all of that, my friends, I can still sing. Not like I used to, but I can still demonstrate the concepts that I'm trying to teach to you in the various exercises as they've been developed. So I know we can all point to people who have been bad teachers and were mechanistic. That is, they could teach you the parts of the larynx, but you didn't end up being a good singer. We can all mention those. We don't need to. How about all the great singers that retired from the Met and went down to Indianapolis University to teach, and they couldn't teach? They were terrible failures. Out of the whole bunch that went down there, only Margaret Harshaw had any luck at all in teaching. The rest were abysmal failures because the ability to teach is considerably more difficult than the ability to sing. There's more information to be incorporated as a singing teacher than just singing. Now, in the old days of bel canto, you learned to sing largely by imitating the maestro. But that took like 10 or 15 years. People are not willing to do that today. And so ever since Garcia in the 19th century, we've been trying to speed up that process. Nevertheless, in any form of teaching, the teacher has to be able to demonstrate. If the teacher wants to demonstrate, I don't think my microphone here will take me singing, but if the teacher wants to demonstrate any particular concept, like a poggio, then they can't demonstrate, see, now that was great, a poggio. Now, you just do that the way I did, suck your belly in, and you'll be able to do that. And you can't say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I used to be able to do it, but I can't do it anymore. Okay, don't teach if that's where you are. If you can't demonstrate, don't teach. Sieppe was so full of conscientiousness, he never tried to be a teacher. He never taught. And a lot of great singers were like that. They knew better. Tebaldi didn't try to teach. If you don't have the talent for teaching, it won't develop on its own, I guarantee you. So there has to be some talent as well as study involved in moving from singing through the information necessary to be able to teach. And occasionally you'll have someone who's a bad teacher, who's a bad singer, but ends up teaching well. That's very rare. Very, very rare. Because the human ego being what it is, most teachers can't say, now don't do it the way I do it some other way. Most teachers are going to demonstrate. Richard Miller told me this story, and when he first started out, he didn't have the vocal science information to know that the vibration he feels in the head or in the sinuses don't add anything to the quality of the mouth, the quality of the tone that comes out the mouth. He believed that still by getting vibrations in the sinuses, it was adding to the voice that comes out the mouth. And he told me he just believed that because he had so many vibrations himself in his own singing. And then he came up with the indisputable voice science information, and he had that those vibrations add nothing to the sound that comes out the mouth, that he had to accept it. And he had to go back and edit his way of teaching. And if you knew Richard and knew him through his entire career, you would have seen that. Now, Richard was a light lyric tenor who sang sometimes, I'm sorry to say, but with a little nasal conjunction. There was a little bit of nasality in his singing, at first at least. And his students ended up imitating him. He would say the right things, but they imitated him. And they would come down to where I was teaching, they'd do their masters, and we'd have to teach that out of them. And they thought they were God's gift to the creation because they were Richard Miller students. And you'd have, una furtiva lagrima. And we'd have to say, are you really sure you want to sing that way? Let's try something slightly different. Now, to be fair to Richard, who was a dear friend of mine and a close colleague, he wasn't aware that he was doing this. And as soon as he became aware of it, he changed. He changed his method of teaching, and he changed his emphasis in teaching to get a very strong first formant in the voice. And that took out all nasal conjunctions. If anybody thought they were going to get away with it, they weren't. And he got even criticized by some of his colleagues because he was working for such a strong first formant in the voice. So there's a beautiful example about how a teacher can amend, edit his own information using voice science and do a lot better job in teaching. But if all you can do is say, well, I read Caruso's book and it said this, that's not going to help anybody. That's not enough. Now, every great singer that I sang with, I tried to learn from. Not by asking them how they sang, because most of them didn't know. They were great singers, but they couldn't describe to you how they sang. And Hines himself said, in my day, we didn't know how we sang, we just did it. Okay, well, that's great, but it's not going to give you too much help in systematizing and organizing your material for teaching. So you begin to ask him questions, and then you begin to analyze his singing mechanically. And I did that with him. I measured his laryngeal drop. I measured his larynx. I observed what happened in his vocal tract when he sang. I studied the way his jaw worked. Okay? I studied the way he breathed. So I used my connection with him, not just to listen to him, although that was very important, but to observe and measure him. And then I began to get information which was consistent with other great singers. So you didn't have to read his coffee table book, Great Singers on Great Singing, because that's a laugh riot. You listen to read all of those singers. They don't have a clue how they sing. They come up with the craziest ideas, and yet they're great singers. So McCracken was talking to Hines in that book about how he used the breath in singing. And McCracken said, well, it's sort of like drawing the feather down in the bow, and then you let it go. And Hines, being ever the literalist, said to him,
now let me get this straight. You mean the arrow with the feathered tip is down in the abdomen?
And so this is how we get screwed up. We take the descriptions that people have and we try to make them literal mechanics, which they're not. So figure out what he was really saying, what he really was referring to, and then you realize that he's talking about the way the suspension system in the larynx works with the inspiratory muscles and what kind of two-way stretch that makes you have as you sing. That's the bow and arrow thing. So that book is a very interesting book, but it's not literal. And people will be just as confused with that book if you try to believe it literally as you will if you try to believe the Bible literally. It's not literal either. Okay, I'll get into trouble on that, I know.
Okay, so if you want to talk about where the real mask is, oh yes.
Now, the real mask is above the hung knee exercise. What are we talking about here? If you want to explain to someone the actual mechanics, use simple terms that are really true. Okay? So, when you do a nasal consonant, a velar nasal like NG, the tongue is in the back of the mouth, all bottled up. The larynx is high, the throat is closed. It's the absolute opposite of any vowel formation. And the sound goes in the nose because it's a nasal consonant. So, we don't want to sing there. If we do, we'll sing in the nose. I'm sure this microphone is distorting this. But we don't want to sing where the nasal consonant takes us. So this teacher says,
well, you must sing above the hung knee.
And he demonstrates with a good tone. I'm backing up, so maybe the mic will take it.
Oh, that's in the true mask. It's up here.
There's no true mask. Come on. These are real things happening within the larynx, within the vocal tract. Give the singers the credit that they can learn basic anatomy. You don't have to become a scientist, but anyone who can learn to read music can learn the basics of vocal science and in far less time. And you won't be so subject to hucksters on the YouTube trying to teach you this or that method. Okay? Now, I've waxed eloquent long enough, and you're free to hate me if you like that other guy. That's fine. I don't care. But for those of you who are interested in really the facts of singing, maybe something I've said is of use to you. I hope so. Bye for now.